What is going on, guys? BrokenMachine here. Hope you guys are all doing well today. This is going to be a quick refresh on the settings. I've got some new ones here to help with your aim, map into targets, and general visibility, and also to help with hearing footsteps. Now, this is mainly a controller guide here, but there is some PC options we are going to go over. So sit back, relax, drop a like, crank up the quality, and enjoy. Set your hip fire sensitivity up here. Somewhere between 30 and 50 is going to be fine for most players. I personally use 100. Invert vertical look options there if you need them. Field of view is the observable world in front of you. A wider FOV means more peripheral vision, but at range, targets will become much more difficult to track and aim at. Somewhere between 90 and 110 is going to be fine for most players. Personally, I use 115. Now, vertical aim ratio, I use 48. Somewhere between that and 56 should be fine for most people. Basically, at 100%, the crosshair moves the same distance when aiming vertically as horizontally. This for most people is going to feel a little weird, so personally, try 48 to 56. If you don't have uniform soldier aiming on, you can edit this value here for when you're aiming down sight. I would recommend you turn on uniform infantry aiming. Basically, if you turned 90 degrees to the right with a pistol and then did the same with a sniper scope, both would feel the same in terms of sensitivity. Highly recommend this on. There is much debate about this coefficient here. Personally, I would recommend either 0 or 178. Now that seems quite a difference, but you might want to try it. Both will feel slightly different, and it might come down to personal preference. Infantry aim assist is the standard aim assist, and slowdown is basically it slows down your sensitivity when you're on target. This is now the beta settings, so these feel so much better, and I would highly recommend you drop these down to 100. If you don't like these on, turn them down, but personally, aim feels great after the most recent update. Recommend you leave these on 100. You can change the input curve here for standard infantry aim. Personally, I use the standard here. If you liked a previous Battlefield game, you can adjust that to here as well. There is also options for linear or dynamic if you've got used to those in Call of Duty, for example. You can also change this if you don't have uniform soldier aiming on as well. Acceleration, basically, if you want some acceleration here, you can adjust these options. Personally, I do not like any acceleration, so I turn this all the way down. If you're from Call of Duty, you might want to try around 20%. Most of these options are going to be personal preference, so I'm not going to go too much into these. Copy these if you wish. Again, all of these personal preference once again. Do not change the zoom option. We are going to change that later on. Zoom aim sensitivity is your sensitivity while aiming down sights. Now this at 100 is 100% of your hip fire sensitivity. If you want your ADS sensitivity while aiming down sights to be half your hip fire, set this to 50%. If you want it to be double, set this to 200%. Now, if you turned on uniform soldier aiming, leave these on default values. You don't want to change these unless you really know what you're doing. Again, most of these options below are going to be personal preference. I would recommend you do change interact and reload though. I like to have this on tap for interact and hold for reload. That works very well for me. Mount breakout, you might want to put this on instant, so as soon as you want to get out of a mounted position, it is instant. Side and up for mount type works for me, and double tap for mount presets. If you want to change the peak type here, some people don't really like the peak on, you can change these options. Personally, I would go with side and up. Gyro options here if you use them. Personally, I do not. Infantry flick look mode is in the game now. You might just want to turn this all the way up so it's instant and super fast. I would highly recommend you change the infantry buttons to alternate, so the right analog becomes crouch and circle on the right side becomes melee. You'll be a much faster player. Various options here for the infantry sticks. Personally, I like to leave these on default values. Now, you want to adjust these controller mappings here. They may have changed since the update. Personally, most of these are fine with me, but I am going to flip the triggers here, so keep on watching if you want to do that as well. So change L1 to L2, R1 to R2. Leave that alone unless you really want to change that there. Keep scrolling down. Here we go. Set fire to R1 and set ADS or zoom to L1. And there you go. Melee should be on circle as well if you set this to alternate in the previous options. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the vehicle settings here. Most of these are going to be similar to your infantry settings. I would recommend sticking with the same. Again, with all of these options here, go with what you've used on the infantry settings. I would, however, recommend you have a play with the decouple tank turret aiming from turning and vehicle aim relative controls. You might want to fire up a server and try these yourself. These two can be quite confusing. I personally use these options. I've got some gameplay on screen right now so you can see what's actually going on here. You can of course change the vehicle control mapping as well if you wish. Personal preference with all of these options. As you get more used to vehicles, and especially the aircraft vehicles, you might want to have a change of these options, but for most people, I think default settings are going to be fine. I will say you might want to change the third-person aircraft camera roll for the helis and the jets. On screen right now is what this looks like, and you might want to have a little play here. There is some joystick options at the bottom here, and I would recommend you change the controller tuning as well. Turn off vibration unless you really want it. That does affect your aim. I would recommend somewhere between 3 and 13 for the dead zone. Basically, this is the area on your stick where the game doesn't respond to any input. With the most recent update, if you set this to too low of a setting, you may notice you're drifting all over the place now, so somewhere between 3 and 15 should work for most people. Now, as for these two settings, I would personally recommend leaving these on 15 and 99.6. This is the beta settings, and personally this worked really well. Most people don't want to change this, but if you know what you're doing, have a little play here. Again, I use both settings for both of these sticks here. Now you want to drop these all down to the lowest values so you can ADS and fire your weapon as quickly as possible. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the mouse and keyboard settings here. Most of this is going to be personal preference, and if you are a PC player, I'm sure you know what you are doing here. There is some infantry mouse aim sensitivity options here with conversions on the right you might want to check out, but I will say make sure you've got mouse raw input on. Your aim is going to feel so much better. Now you want to hear some footsteps, right? So I'd recommend following my settings here. Master volume at 100, sound effects at 100. Normally I have the music off, but I've got it up a little bit for streams right now. Commander VO volume at 70, campaign volume at 70, UI at 100, hit indicator is on, turn off the controller speaker volume. And right now I am testing this setting here, and it seems to work absolutely amazing for me when it comes to footsteps. So I've got this on stereo and I've got this on night mode. This is working really, really well for me. Highly recommend you try this. If you're not sure about your sound system, set this to auto, but night mode seems to be absolutely amazing for footsteps. Personally, I turn off voice chat, and there is more options here. Tinnitus settings as well if you need them. Personally recommend setting this to 0 unless you need it. Subtitles, turn off the music if you're streaming, and if you want to hear more footsteps, and that is pretty much it for this section here. Now we got to adjust the HUD just a little bit. You want to keep that on, but I've got some settings here you might want to change up with the game. So this filter, make sure this is on. This will improve soldier visibility. Highly recommend having this on. Now when it comes to advanced HUD settings, I don't want to get too much into this, but I would turn down some of these settings, especially down here. So go all the way down, turn down the icon intensity, somewhere between 60 and 80 should be fine. Now you can change the HUD completely here, but I'm not going to go into too specifics. It's pretty self-explanatory. However, I will say you want to turn down the zoomed options here, somewhere between 60 and 80 should be fine. So basically the icons on screen while you're aiming down sight are going to be reduced in terms of opacity, less distracting. You should be able to see across the map and see enemies much more clearly. Highly recommend you change all of those except for the enemy icons while zoomed. Most of the time you need to see these, so highly recommend you leave this on 100, but the rest of them on zoomed, drop it down somewhere between 60 and 80. Minimap size, if you like my minimap on the screen here, highly recommend you follow my settings. Again, these are pretty all self-explanatory here. I would recommend the view distance on foot to be set to the maximum at 300, so you get a much better and bigger minimap. Again, leave all of these options on default unless you really know what you're doing here. I would recommend you change your crosshair. This is going to help you track targets so much better. So as for the crosshair color, pinky purple, maybe a blue, cyan, a green, you know, something bright, something that you can see targets well with, not too distracting. You've got examples on the right side so you can see how it looks in various situations. I actually quite like a pinky purple. That works really well for me. Highly recommend you set the crosshair thickness to thin. Infantry crosshair projection, you want this off. When it's disabled, the crosshair is static and always aligned with the center of the screen, so your aim is going to be more consistent. Highly recommend. Now, hit indicator. I've actually turned down the opacity, so it's a little lower, so I can see more targets around people much better. Now, this you might want to copy. This is going to speed up your gameplay, trust me. So I've got here blue for standard hits, red for headshot, and green for kill. Basically, when you've got a standard hit, it's just blue, so you need headshot perhaps, you might need to do some more damage. As soon as you see red, you know you've done a ton of damage, so you might not need another headshot, just go for a body shot. And then as soon as you see green, you know to snap to another target and move on. So this can highly increase your effectability on the battlefield. Highly recommend. And yellow and orange for these options here, leave on that. And again, most of these are going to be personal preference. Disable the chat there and some options if you don't want to see that. When it comes to gameplay options, most of these are going to be personal preference. Change these if you need to. Capture area outline, leave on if you're a new player. If you're experienced, you might want to turn this off. HUD prompts, all of these, I leave them on because I'm streaming and I like that kind of helpful gameplay, so I leave these on. Infantry aim sensitivity 100. Again, we talked about this earlier. This is my main sensitivity. 30 to 50 is going to be fine for most people. Mouse aim sensitivity there, and most of these are going to be personal preference. Once again, I would recommend you turn off the roll camera in landing roll. So basically, when you land and roll, there won't be an animation of going over your head. You know, you're just gonna see your character quickly flip over, and you're gonna get a nice view of what's going on around you. So I'm not gonna go too much into these options here. Mount type, side and up, highly recommend. Instant on the mount breakup. So as soon as you exit out of your mount, it is instant, no delay there. And again, copy these options unless you really know what you're doing here. I would recommend interact and reload to be on tap for interact and reload for hold. Vehicle aim sensitivity, we changed those in the controller settings. Change these again if you know what you're doing. All of these options here, we have gone over those earlier, so you should not have to change these once again. Go back to my guide and refer to my settings if you need to. If you are playing on console, make sure your monitor is set to the highest refresh rate available and turn on any additional options if you can. VRR is highly recommended, especially if you're playing on a PS5 Pro. I would also recommend you set your controller to USB. I'm sure there's similar options on Xbox as well. On screen right now is how you do it on PlayStation. Now, as for graphics, if you are on a console right now, particularly the PS5 Pro, make sure you set this to performance mode. You'll get a much smoother experience and less input lag. Highly recommend. I do play this game on a PS5 Pro as well, and it feels absolutely smooth and gorgeous. Now, as for PC graphics settings, I am using mainly low settings right now, a couple of high. These are my settings. I think most of these are pretty self-explanatory. You know, terrain quality, that improves the terrain, texture filtering, texture quality, all this kind of stuff. I think you guys know what you're doing. Honestly, if you want to see more targets, see people much more further ranges, follow my settings here and use those. Of course, I do stream the game, so I don't want the game looking so bad, so I set texture quality to high. These are the settings I would recommend. A world brightness somewhere between 50 and 60 should help you with visibility. Highly recommend that. I would recommend leaving these options mainly on their own here on default values. There is fixed resolution scale, you can change that. I do use enabled and boost on the NVIDIA Reflex low latency. DLSS for the upscaling. This looks absolutely amazing. It doesn't seem to affect input lag. And of course, there is some options here if you want to get some more frames. Personally, these are my recommendations if you are using an NVIDIA card. Field of view options we discussed earlier. I would recommend setting the vehicle third person field of view as maximum on console and PC. It might look a little different on console here, but make sure that vehicle third person field of view is all the way to the widest so you can see as much as you can around the vehicle in third person. Set weapon field of view to wide. You don't want that all up on your screen. Weapon motion blur, all these motion blurs, and camera shaker mounts, set them all the way to the bottom. You don't need all that shaking on the screen. You want to be more competitive. And make sure reduce sprint camera bobbing is on as well, so your camera isn't bobbing all along while you're running around the map. And turn off these options as well. PC options again here, make sure vertical sync is off. Set your main monitor, borderless, full screen, up to you. And that's pretty much it. If you're on console, make sure you're following a similar setting here as well. Some accessibility options if you need them. Most players need to turn off menu narration, subtitle options there as well. Volume, audio, we've gone over these before. Color profiles, you can set a custom color profile here if you wish, and there is some colorblind options there as well if you need them. Recommend you use what I said earlier. They should be on what you set them to. Again, all of these, we've gone over these before. Incoming text, chat, speech, most of these need to be off unless you need them. And again, most of these are personal preference once again. Change the difficulty of the campaign if you need to there, and again, these are personal preference when it comes to choices. As for the system options, you can uninstall certain content if you don't really want it in the game anymore. Show player created content, turn that off if you don't want to see any of that. Command console, I leave disabled. Streamer mode, anonymous mode, all stuff here if you need them. Enable radio music, I have this turned off, I don't want this on. Minimap, we talked about that earlier. Gameplay data sharing, if you don't want to share your information with sites outside, turn that off. Scoreboard ping, turn it on so you can see your ping to the server. And that is pretty much that. Also on PC, there is various NVIDIA options. I would highly recommend you copy and paste what I am using on my own PC. These are pretty good options and you should be totally fine. Also, make sure to set your monitor to the highest refresh rate available. A lot of people make this mistake and don't do that, so make sure it's all set and good to go. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Do be sure to drop a like if you did. Make sure to subscribe if you are new. I make tutorials, tips, gameplays, and streams here on YouTube, and I hope to see you guys very soon. Thank you very much for watching. Take it easy, guys. Catch you later.